As an educator, independence movement activist, and political leader in Korea, Bekbum dedicated his whole life to Korea's independence and peaceful unification. He is our nation's eternal great teacher whose name still makes our hearts overflow with pride even half a century after his death. What was he like? I wish our nation to become the most beautiful nation in the world. The one thing I desire in infinite quantity is the power of a highly developed culture. He was born to father Kim Soon-young and mother Gwak Nak-won in Haeju, Hwanghae Province on July 11, 1876. Bekbum grew up as an ordinary playful kid like many others. After experiencing the class distinction between the gentry and the common people, however, he studied very hard to pass the state examination necessary to be a gentry member. But he gave it up as he saw briberies and corruptions going on in the places where the state examination was held. In 1893, he entered the Donghak religion and spearheaded an attack on the Haeju fort as the district leader of Palbang. The attack was defeated by the Korean government and Japanese armies. In 1895, he secretly stayed in Sir An Tae-hoon's house in Cheonggye-dong after the failure of the Donghak peasant movement. This gave him an opportunity to take a new national perspective through many teachings from the Confucian scholar Go Nung-sun, and thereby develop his thoughts further. During his inspection tour to China in 1895, he joined a righteous army troop in order to find ways to save the nation. In 1896, he killed the Japanese spy Lieutenant Tsuchida in front of public eyes in Chihapo Anak in order to avenge the murder of the Queen Myeongsong and wipe away the national disgrace. Bekbum proudly announced that his action was to revenge the Queen's murder and was imprisoned. While in prison, he studied Western books, broadening his worldview and widening the horizons of his political consciousness. He realized that the empowerment of the Korean people by education was the only way to save the nation. As the decree of amnesty issued by the Korean Emperor Gwangmu was deterred by Japan, he broke out of prison and began to carry out an education and enlightenment campaign as an educator in Jangyeon, Hwanghae Province. Won't you join me to make the entire mankind in the world love our nation's culture in the future? I believe that the power of our people, especially the power of our education, can make this happen. Bekbum proposed a cultural nation rather than a rich and strong country as the founding principle of our nation. A happy country that would share the happiness with other countries. Such a country was the very cultural nation which he dreamed of. If God were to ask me, "What is your wish?" I would reply without hesitation, "My wish is Korea's independence." If he then asked me, "What is your next wish?" I would reply again, "My wish is our nation's independence." If he asked for the third time, "What is your next wish?" I would reply even more loudly, "My wish is my nation Korea's complete independence." In 1905, Japan forced Korea to sign the Korea-Japan Treaty that deprived Korea of its diplomatic sovereignty. Bekbum struggled against the treaty by addressing a petition to the king and giving public speeches, and joined the Shinminhae to actively engage in activities for restoring Korea's national sovereignty. As An Myung-gun was arrested for raising funds for an independence movement, Japan began to repress independence movement's activists in Haeju. As Hwanghae Secretary General of the New People's Society, Baekbum too was under arrest for the Anak incident and the 105 people incident and imprisoned for 4 years and 8 months. Though he underwent severe torture, he strengthened his will for national independence all the more and created his pen name Baekbum to symbolize it. In 1919, when the March 1st independence movement broke out in Korea, he evaded imperialist Japan's tight surveillance networks to exile himself to Shanghai. Baekbum worked together with other independence movement activists to establish the Korean Provisional Government in Shanghai. Always willing to be even a humble gatekeeper of the KPG, he was appointed police minister for 4 years before eventually becoming the Minister of Internal Affairs and the President. In 1931, Baekbum created the Korean Patriots Corps, consisting of patriotic young people under a decision in the cabinet meeting of the KPG to reinvigorate the independence movement and the KPG. I came to Shanghai to dedicate myself to activities for national independence so as to obtain eternal happiness. On January 8, 1932, the patriotic martyr Lee Bung-chang, a member of the KPC, threw explosives to the Japanese emperor in Tokyo, the heart of Japan. Prior to a full-scale invasion to mainland China, Japan initiated the Shanghai incident by deploying 100,000 Army and Navy troops on January 28, 1932. China mobilized 300,000 troops to resist the Japanese aggression for a month, but lost Shanghai under enormous casualties. I purchased this wristwatch for 6 won, but yours costs only 2 won. Mine will be useless to me in 1.5 hours. Let us exchange our watches. I wish we would meet after death. On April 29, 1932, the patriotic martyr Yu Bong-gil, a member of the KPC, threw a bomb at the ceremony commemorative of the Japanese emperor's birthday and Japan's occupation of Shanghai held in Hongkou Park, and killed important Japanese figures including the commander of the Japanese army in Shanghai, the government chancellor of Japanese residents in Shanghai, and others. The KPC's patriotic deeds, designed and directed by Baekbum, were splendid feats which broke the relentless vigor of imperialist Japan at one stroke and let the world know Koreans' desperate desire for independence. They also offered an opportunity for Korea and China to restore their relationship, cooled by the Manbosan incident, so that the Chinese government began to support the Korean independence movement. Since then, the KPG and Baekbum moved to inland China to avoid the brunt of the Japanese army. In 1933, he met with Chiang Jis, the head of the Chinese Kuomintang government, in 1933, and obtained Jiang's promise to support his plan to train Korean young people. As Japan started the Second Sino-Japanese War in 1937, the KPG left Changsha, went through Guangzhou, Liushu, and Zhejiang, and finally arrived in Chongjin in 1940, where the Kuomintang government was seated. On September 17, 1940, he finally established the Korean Liberation Army. By further reinforcing its naval forces through absorbing the Korean Volunteers Corps, the army grew into about 700 troops. The KPG, led by Baekbum, declared war against Japan on December 10, 1941, and took part in the Second World War as a member of the Allied forces. The KPG tried to achieve independence by our own hands, by arranging for the Korean Liberation Army to advance to Korea. However, Japan surrendered due to atomic bombing on August 15, 1945, before the Korean Liberation Army carried out the advance operation. To Koreans, the liberation came with deep regret. As a noble and pure nationalist, Baekbum Kim-koo dedicated himself to Korea's independence during 36 years of colonial rule. His splendid contributions are imprinted in the history of Korea's independence movements. For the moment, my only wish is to strive hand in hand with 30 million compatriots to build a unified and independent country. On November 23, 1945, he came back to his beloved fatherland in 27 years, not as the president of the KPG, but in the individual's capacity by the request of the U.S. military government. But Korea became divided along the 38th parallel, while the issue of a 5-year trusteeship of Korea was raised in the Moscow Conference of Foreign Ministers. Bekbum immediately organized the Committee for Anti-Trusteeship National Mobilization and convened a national emergency conference. He carried out active anti-trusteeship movements as the chair of the conference. He urged to establish a single independent government of unified Korea through a general election supervised by the UN, without the trusteeship of Korea by the US and the Soviet Union, and any intervention in Korea's domestic affairs by other countries. Because of the 38th parallel, there is no unification, no independence, no autonomy, and no democracy to us. Because of the 38th parallel, there are people's hunger, broken families, and fratricidal struggles. Only when the 38th parallel in our mind collapses can the 38th parallel on the ground collapse. In order to establish a unified government, Bekbum proposed South-North negotiations and the South Korea Leaders Conference to North Korea on February 16, 1948, and was headed for Pyongyang on April 19th.
조국 분열의 위기를 만고하기 위하여 남북의 열렬한 애국자들이 일당에 회집하여
In spite of his tremendous efforts, Koreans saw 2 governments established, one in South Korea on August 15, 1948, and the other one in North Korea on September 9, 1948. As he had worried, our nation underwent the fratricidal tragedy of the Korean War, initiated by the North in 1950. On June 26, 1949, a year before the war. Though retiring from politics after his efforts for a united Korea came to naught, he never gave up the hope of a unified Korea, committing himself to the education of teenagers. However, he was assassinated by Ahn Do-hee, who was a pawn of anti-unification forces and pro-Japanese groups. It was a deep sorrow to the entire nation. The sound of people weeping, stamping their feet here. The sound of people weeping, letting out a cry there. The sound of heaven weeping, earth weeping, even the sea weeping. The sound of endless weeping. Can you hear? Can you hear? Bekbum is our nation's great teacher who devoted his entire life to Korea's independence and a unified Korea, right in the middle of our nation and history. Bekbum said that the one thing he desired in infinite quantity was the power of a highly developed culture. Isn't it now our job to build the peaceful and united Korea and create the country of beautiful culture he eagerly longed for?